Alright, for your very last assignment, and it was described yesterday, so go watch the video. This will take up the last remaining 10 days of your senior year in this class. And briefly, it is to write a Blackjack program that is functional. And there is a rubric that I set up that I'll grade it with based on function and appearance. Function was 2,000 and appearance is 1,000. Altogether, it's worth 3,000 points, the same as 3 tests to finish the year. Yesterday, I promised you we would go through a simulation of what a game is like. So here's what you have to think about once you get into the code for the game. You have to think about your cards. The cards have to come up at random. So you're going to have to set a variable for the cards. So the variable for the cards could be something, for example, C. And you have 52 cards in a deck. And we said that we were going to use multiple decks of cards. You could just consider it to be unlimited for this game. Now, you don't have to consider suit. You don't have to have ace of hearts or an ace of spades differentiation. So in other words, you can really only have 13 cards that you have to generate randomly. And those would be ace through king. And those are 13 cards. If you generate a random number from 1 to 13, you can assign those cards to each number. So an ace would be 1. If a 1 comes up, you're going to have to display an ace. And of course, if 2 comes up all the way through 10, then that's what you would display as 10. If an 11 comes up, it would be a jack. 12 is a queen, and 13 is a king. So generate the code such that you do the following. Assign a random number, and you could have random integer, and it could be from 1 to 13. And you could store that for A. And then you're going to have a block of code that will assign whatever it is you're going to display. And this block of code really doesn't have to be repeated, in other words, typed in 4 and 5 times. You can write the code once, and then you can set a loop such that it'll go through and deal out the cards, which would be 4. And then, if you need a card after that, you can just have a piece of code that draws it randomly. So for your code on this, you could have if A equals 1. Then you would output something at some spot on the screen that would display an ace. Or maybe not. It doesn't have to display it depending on what you have. And before we go any further with these code tips, remember that when the dealer deals out the cards, you're going to have 2 cards for the dealer and 2 cards for you. Your cards are going to be shown on the screen, but technically they're only shown to you. You can't flip them up on the screen and flip them back. It's not a touch screen on the calculator. So yours would be displayed to you. You would only be able to see 1 of the dealer's cards. So you're still going to select cards and deal it to them, and in your program, if you assign a variable to each one, for example, we make this D, E, F, and G, for example. You can make it whatever you want. The dealer's card is still going to be assigned to E, but you're not going to display it because you won't be able to see what it is. And then your 2 cards are displayed. Once you figure out how to display these cards and choose them randomly, you have to have a piece of code in there that does this. You have to have D plus E and figure out if that is greater than 21. If that's greater than 21, then you win because the dealer cannot go over 21 right off the bat. And of course you'd have to have F plus G greater than 21, and both of these would be ifs. And then you would assign something that would say you lose, the dealer loses, or you both lose because you've both gone over 21. Now I'm sure there's a rule in 21 that says that, if you both bust, then it's a loss for both of you, so it doesn't really count against you. So you can assign this. If D plus E is greater than 21, then output bust. And the same thing for down here. Don't forget, you want to keep track of how many wins that you have and they have. So you could assign W for wins for the dealer and maybe X for wins for you. And you can make the game go through a certain number of loops. Try to make it at least 10. I want it to be something that I could play and go through it and then grade it. I don't want to have to sit through it 50 times. I don't want to play 50 hands of blackjack. So you can make 10 loops. I say 10 loops, but it really means 10 times through the game is what you can do. Alright, so here's a quick review of what we've gone over so far in the class. You have to be able to output the cards on the screen. Yours are visible to you. The dealer's cards, you can only see one of them. The other one you cannot, but they're all assigned something. And you want to make sure you assign the value of each card, D, E, and then maybe F and G. Do your test for the bust. If it's greater than 21, it's a bust, so you can't do it. Also, there's another thing you have to consider. And look at that first card on the dealer's hand. That is an ace. The ace can be 1 or what? 11. So you might want to have something in there that does this. If you assign 11 to ace all the time, and this card ends up being, let's see, a 10, then it's going to be blackjack. For example, if you also start drawing cards, and I'm skipping ahead a little bit, if I have a 12 down here on my hand and I draw an ace, and you've automatically set it to be equal to 11, then it ends up being what, 23, and you bust, but you have to account for the fact that it could also be 1. It's going to be 1 or 11. So just because you have 12 in your hand, make sure you put a piece of code in that allows it to be 13. You'll have a sum of 13 instead of 23 because then it'll count as a loss. That's something you have to look for. If you put all of your stuff in output, then you could have the stars or something else that you could use like this. You could also do it with eyes. I don't know how good that would look. But if you did it with stars, it would look something like this. I'm not even accounting for the proper number of spaces or anything. I'm just giving you a general idea. And then put your ace in there or 10 or whatever, and you would have this side by side over here with 2 cards. That's one way you could do it, and it's very possible to get 1,000 on your appearance having never used draw before, as long as it's exceptionally neat and it's easy to understand and easy to follow and there are no glitches. Here is one hand of blackjack that's been generated randomly. So the dealer has a card that's down and he has one up that is 6. We're not even going to concern ourselves with suits. You end up with a 9 and a 2. So once the code has been generated to produce this on the screen, it now becomes your option. You either have to hit or stay. So as soon as the cards are dealt, you have to have that option on the screen, which means you've got an input code in there that's going to let you type in an answer. Now, you can do strings, and a string means this. With the $sign, a string, if you want to learn how to do that, it's in this book up here if you want to come get it. Maybe a few of you might, most of you probably won't, but a string will let you type in the yes and the no and all that stuff. Or you could do this. Hit equals 1, stay equals 2. So make sure you have some kind of input in there that will allow you to do that. Now, in real life here, if you have a 9 and a 2 in front of you, are you going to hit or stay? You're going to hit. So you're going to press 1 and enter, and it's going to randomly generate a card. So that's another thing you have to consider. The card's got to be generated randomly, so you have to go to your 1 to 13 random generation. It's going to come up with something, and let's say it generates a 4. You've got to draw another card in there, and it's got to be 4. Also, during this loop, you have to come up with a sum. 9 plus 2 is 11, plus 4 is 15. Have I busted? No. So you have to make sure that's running in the background to make sure that if you bust, it automatically comes up with you lose. Now you have 15. Do you hit or do you stay? The dealer has a 6. What if he has an ace under his card? That's an 11. That's 17, so he wins. If he has a 10 under his card, it would be a 16. He wins. You only have 15. What should you do? You should hit. So we're going to hit. That means you type 1, press enter, and you have a card that's generated, and it comes up to be a 3. So you have to go through that code of random generation. It's a 3, so it comes back as a 3, and then draw that card. So now you have to add that in there. 9 plus 2 plus 4 plus 3 comes up to be what? 18. Do you hit or do you stay? Stay. So you would press 2 and hit enter, so you're done. You have a total of 18. If you want to, you can display that sum as you go along so you don't have to count the cards, and you can do it off to the right if you want. Now on the top, it's now for the dealer, and you don't want the dealer's hand to go through even though it's going to be automatic. You want it to stop when it generates something. So you got to go through the code for the dealer, 1 to 13. What do you have to do before you even go through the code? There's something that always happens in the game once you're finished and the dealer starts. What can you not see up there? Yeah, this card. So you would have to turn it up. So you need some code in there that would display this. And here's what they ended up with. They have a 7 and a 6. So the dealer's code is going to be slightly different than your code. And here's how it works. Remember, you ended up with 18, and the dealer has a 7 and a 6. So they now have 13. You need to make sure the code will generate a card randomly and display it if the dealer's sum is less than your sum, because they have no choice. They have to play. So if this is less than this, you have to draw a card for the dealer. So up it comes. They end up with a 4. Have they won? No, because their total is now 17. If their total is 17, the game has paused so that you can see what has happened. But if it's 17, which is less than 18, you have to get another card for the dealer. So automatically it will do this. And you would have to press enter to get the pause to go through. So another card is drawn, and they come up with a 2. What do they now have? 19. And now the comparison code will now say 19 is greater than 18. Who wins?
Dealer.
The dealer wins. And plus 1 has to be added to what?
The count for the wins.
Yeah, the count for the wins. So if W is the wins for the dealer, so it would be W plus 1. Store it in for W. What should W and, if your wins are X, what should W and X start with at the beginning of each round? Should be 0, because nobody has any wins before you start playing. And then you start adding to it. You can use an unlimited amount of cards, even though in casinos they will use a certain number of decks. Here's the problem with using a limited number of cards. If you're going to limit the number of cards you have, let's say even if it were just one deck of cards, if you use one deck, then here's what you have to account for. If I choose a random number from 1 to 13 and it comes up 1, which is an ace, but I'm using one deck of cards that has how many in it? 52, then it's not going to work. You're going to have to generate a number from 1 to 52, and you have to account for all 52 cards, which means 1 could be an ace of spades. 14 could be an ace of hearts. And that is a lot of code to go through. You would have to have 52 different lines of code to account for just one deck of cards. Now, if you go through 2 decks, there is a shortcut that you could take, but I don't want to get into that because it would take pretty much the rest of the class. But let's say you use 2 decks of cards. If you had 2 decks, that's 104 cards, and 1 through 52 would be from deck 1, and 53 through 104 would be for deck 2. So you would have 104 different lines of cards that you would have to use. And that's 104 different codes, lines of code. So I don't know if I'd go with that or not. By today, which is 4/30/13, you should have your opening screen pretty much done, or at least you have a solid idea of what you have to do, and you just have to type in the code tonight. And like we went through yesterday, you can put your entire opening screen in draw if you want to, and actually color in the number 21 and draw out the word Blackjack along with your information, created by, and then put your name in there, also copyright 2013, and something in there that says press enter to begin. So this is what you're looking at once you've done your welcome screen, which is a blank screen because you don't have the code for the function of the game done yet. What's the first thing you should do after the welcome screen? Yeah, clear the screen. So clear the screen after the welcome screen. And then after that, you need to start assigning some values for some variables. For example, remember I told you that if you use W for dealer and X for you, then they have to start off at 0. So you would have 0 assigned to W and 0 assigned to X. And you want to keep some notes on paper as to what you have assigned and what they mean somewhere, so that you don't get into your program and then you're seeing A, B, C, D, G, W, X, and you can't remember what they stand for. Write it down somewhere so you know. And this will be for the wins. Now next, how many times do you want the game to go through? How many games of Blackjack do you want to play?
You said 10.
Yeah, 10 is the minimum. If you do 10, as a matter of fact, we'll just make it 5. Just only 5 games. So how about 5? You want 5 games. If you want 5 games, then that means you're going to have a for loop starting near the top of your program and then ending near the end of it so that it runs 5 times. And the code is 4A1 to 5, and then down here at the end of the program it ends. And when it ends, you can go back and do totals and stats and all that. In here is going to be the body of your program where you're going to play the game. Okay, so what do you do first to start a game? What must be generated in order to even play the game?
The instructions.
Yeah, you can do instructions. So we'll have instructions. And what could you remind the player to do as they go through the game? What should they have to know to start with? Don't explain the game of blackjack to them because they don't know it, then they can just figure it out on their own. But what should they know to do? Yeah. Press something in order to do something. And it's up to you what that is. You can press something to stop the game. You can press it to keep going. Whatever you want to put in there is up to you. I'm not going to tell you you have to do that, but you can. All right, so we're getting close to hand one, the first game. What must be done in order to play the game to start with? What do I have to have?
Cards.
You have to have cards. So you're going to have to create your code that is a random integer. I can't remember. Yes, it's RAND and then INT. Okay. Rand int and 1 to 13. There are 13 cards in a suit, and since suits don't matter for us because we're not going to increase the difficulty of this by including suits, we're just going to put 1 to 13. So 1 to 13, and remember you have 4 cards to deal out to start with. So you can have a block of code that is for dealing. And it's the initial deal. So for that initial deal, you could have a loop that is for D1 to 4 and then end it at some point. And within that, you would have a random integer. And then you could come up with the card, go through your if-thens for if it's 1 and if it's 2 and so on. Or you can do it this way. To avoid, and this is a tip I'll give you, if you want to deal out 4 cards, there's nothing that says you have to use a loop. You could also do this. You could do rand int 1 to 13 and assign that to a variable. Make it A. Do the same thing and assign it to B. Same thing, C. And same thing for D. There's your 4 cards. Except A and B have got to be for the dealer, and C and D must be for you. What must you do for A or B for the dealer before you put them out on the screen? You have to determine what.
Which one's face up, which one's face down?
Right. Which card is going to be face up or face down? So it's up to you. But if it were me, I would let A equal whatever it is, but when I go to the screen, I'm not displaying A. So we've created 4 cards. Above is dealer, below is you. Here's the screen, and I'll explain this in the minimum requirements because some of you are really advanced at this. There's a couple of you that are more advanced than I am when it comes to drawing and programming and doing it quicker than I can. I can do it. It takes me a while to write a program, but some of you are much quicker. So here's the screen, and each little dash is a character space. So let's say I make my cards with stars. I do this and this. And then here, 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 and here, and then there. Inside of that, I can put whatever the card was equal to. And then skip a space if I want and go right beside it. Now, do I have to put another row of stars there, or not another row, but another column of stars?
Yeah. If you're skipping a space.
If I skip a space, and then I put another column of stars here, and then here, I'm not going to draw them all out, and do that, is that a wise move or not?
You'd save space by putting them right next to each other and only using the one line.
Yes, you would save space. You would save 2 columns, because with this you've taken up 3. If I just use this and then put the 4 there, I've now only taken up 5. And then for each card after that I take up 2 columns. Because how many columns do I have to deal with altogether across the screen?
8.
Not across. 16 going across. You have 16 spaces going across, so you have technically 16 columns to deal with. So I would not skip a space and try to separate the cards out. I would simply do that. Or you could use another character altogether. What other character could you use beside the asterisk or the multiplication sign? The plus sign. You could use a plus sign. Is there anything else that only has just one mark to it that you could use that's on the calculator? When you type in I, alpha I, is it a like a steel beam, I-beam I, or is it just a stick?
I think it's just a stick. No, it's an I-beam I.
It's an I-beam I, so that would look kind of strange. So it's up to you to get creative on how you want to do it. You can use stars, you can use plus sign, whatever you want to do.